of Hermes cover Click and Coffee. This time we will focus on the region Eastern Africa, its risks and opportunities, making business there. So I'm very excited for our discussion today. My name is Sophia Schultz-Renz, and I work for the German Export Credit Guarantee Scheme at Euler Hermes, or as we call it, Hermes cover, since around about 7 years now. And I'm heading the Department for Country Bank and Sector Analytics. But actually, I'm not in focus today, but of course, the panelists who you can see on the screen already, and I would like to introduce you to them just now. And let me start, ladies first, with Eva Rösler. Since October 2019, Eva is heading the Competence Center for German Export Finance within the Delegation for the German Industry and Commerce in Eastern Africa, based in Nairobi. And before that, she has led the German desk of the German DEG together with the INM Bank Nairobi. So Eva knows the market in Eastern Africa extremely well, I would say, and I'm sure she will share a lot of interesting insights with us today. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm very glad to have you on the panel today, Eva, so very welcome. And secondly, I would like to introduce to you Chris Osore. Chris is actually an award-winning architect and director of the DLR Group Africa, which is an integrated design firm providing architecture, engineering, planning, interior design, you name it, for the region. Plus, and this is even more interesting to me at least, he is co-founder of the student community provider Student Factory Africa, which is a very interesting initiative, as with their work they aspire to provide safe, secure and affordable environments, including living for students in Africa. So really interesting. Maybe you can share some insights on that, Chris, later on. Chris has started his career in the US. However, since 2007, he's back in Kenya and hence has a deep knowledge of the market as well. And I'm sure a lot of interesting insights and experience to share too. So very welcome. It's a pleasure to have you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to have you here. And at this stage, maybe one information to the audience. Of course, you are more than welcome to participate in the discussion with any questions you may have. You can post them via the chat function on the bottom right of your WebEx window, and we will come to your questions then later on in the session. And with that very brief words of administrative introductory, let me now dive into the topic. First of all, I would like to give you a brief overview of what Hermes cover actually is for those of you who don't know us yet. So we, the Euler Hermes AG, manage the German Export Credit Guarantee Scheme. We call it Hermes cover on behalf and for the account of the Federal Republic of Germany. And our main job is to provide protection against commercial and political risk arising in connection with export business, which are transacted by an exporter from Germany and or financed by banks. And here it is very important to note that we do that regardless of the size of the transaction. That's something I would like to emphasize here. So whether you have a project of $10,000 or $10 million, everything is possible. Just get in touch with us, which leads me to our next point. Our job is to provide protection against political and commercial risk. Our passion is to make export projects possible. So if you have a project in mind, just get in touch, discuss the structure with us, and we are very glad to help. And I think I'm already speaking on behalf of Eva as well, and she will come to that later on. So in 2020, we had a volume of new transactions underwritten of 16.7 billion euro in about 150 countries, which were to 80% projects in emerging markets. So when we now dive a little deeper into the African market and jump to the next slide, Let me show you our cover policies for some selected markets in Eastern Africa. We thought to make the topic Eastern Africa a little more tangible, we decided to focus on 5 countries. This is Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and Tanzania. And as you can see here on this slide, in those 5 countries, we are in principle open for cover, and in Kenya, even without any restrictions. You can find the further details on our cover policies on our website, the ARGA portal. And I would leave it with that on the overview on our cover policies here and on the overview to our instrument in general, and now turn to a rather macro perspective on the region to introduce us all a little more to the discussion we are having today. And please jump to the next slide. Eastern Africa in many aspects couldn't be more diverse, but I'm sure we are all in agreement that they have at least one thing in common, and that is a lot of potential. That's why we are here today. So maybe let's take Ethiopia first. The country faces significant economic and political challenges. However, at the same time, we see a lot of need for investment, so a very interesting market to us. Then we have Kenya, where the debt burden actually weighs quite heavily, but also here we have a lot of potential, especially in connection with the strong and vivid private market we see here. Then we have Uganda, which is hardly hit by the corona crisis, but also here a lot of potential. Here we are extremely interested in the agribusiness actually. And we have Rwanda, where the corona crisis tests actually its major economic driver, the conference and tourism sector, but also here still a lot of chances. And last but not least, Tanzania with a great domestic market. However, also here and especially here, the business environment is quite challenging. But without a doubt, we see plenty of opportunities. The question is just, how do the risks weigh against the opportunities, and what needs to be done to make more use of the wide range of opportunities we see? And with that, I would now go into the discussion with my fellow panelists. And I think we can switch the presentation off here to see us in a bigger window to see the faces. And yeah, maybe one question to warm up for you, Eva and Chris, and to get into the topic. As I already mentioned, Eastern Africa is without a doubt a very interesting region. I'm very sure you are in agreement on that. However, I would be interested to know why you decided to, or what you love about your region. Why are you active in Eastern Africa? What is fascinating you the most? And I would say let's start with Chris for the first round here.
Yeah, thank you, Sophia, and thank you all panelists, Eva, and thank you all attendees. I made a strategic decision to bring my architecture practice back to Africa because of the amazing potential that is in East Africa and Africa in general. And a big point to that was, as a developer or an architect, you're able to have a lot more impact with a lot less finance. The needs are still quite basic. Things like housing, education, healthcare, and with just bringing a little bit of expertise, professionalism, and best practice to bear on the market, you're able to really do some amazing things. So that was one of the big drivers, obviously being able to do more with less.
Thank you so much, Chris, for this introductory words. Very interesting to hear your view on that. And Eva, I would ask you the same question. Would you agree? Anything different to add? What is fascinating you?
So thank you very much, Sophia, and good morning to everybody. I have to say, at the beginning, I already had a problem with my internet, so this is why I went off and on again, but I'm happy that I'm now live again. So I'm living now for 5 years in Eastern Africa, And I had the possibility to travel to many countries and also meet many people, businesses, and also companies within the East African region, but also within the Southern African region. And I think that experiencing the African continent is always fascinating when you are from abroad, because there's much to see, explore, that many of us just know from maybe books or TV. The light, the landscape, the friendliness of the people. And it's like a continent that welcomes you. I think that also, I mean, I live in the hustling and bustling Nairobi, I have to say. And although I hate the traffic jams, I really love the atmosphere of the city a lot. And of course, when we talk about business, which is our focus here, I think I would like to point out the creativity that we find here. Companies and business owners, they are always willing to explore new opportunities. As Chris also said, you see potential, you see opportunities, you will investigate possibilities as a business owner, and I very often discuss on how make things happen. And this is actually now where the financing comes in. It's a very important part for going further and even beyond.
Thank you so much, Eva, for sharing your view on this fascinating region. I've noted for you friendliness of the people, creativity, and potential, and the willingness to enter something new. And I'm sure this also helps you in actually doing your job day by day and makes it so interesting. So now that we know your passion about the region, I would like to go one level deeper and discuss your role in the field of export promotion. And I think it would be very interesting to hear what your job at the Competence Center actually is. What do you do every day, and how do you support export projects in the region? Eva.
Thank you, Sophia. So actually, the global competence centers for German export finance, I call them global because we're not only in Nairobi, for whom does not know it, we are also in Dubai and Singapore. We are a further support instrument of the German Ministry of Economy and Energy to foster trade and business relations. So I always call myself or try to be a bridge, let's say, to support all parties, importers, exporters, and even financing banks for making export financing happen and to structure applications. And my focus is also, obviously, on importers to inform about German export credit financing, and I help or accompany applications. I do pre-analyze financials, and I pre-discuss transactions. So last week I had a very nice feedback from an international company, a CFO, who said that she really appreciates the support and the persistency to make or to try to make the export financing happen in one transaction. And this is what my role, I find, makes it fascinating to be able to support and make it happen within Africa. And when I look into my own statistics, in the last 2 years, I've talked to over 100 importers and exporters. I think I have roughly a promising pipeline of over 32 applications. Most of them are in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, but also a bit more out of Eastern Africa, in Botswana, South Africa, and Zambia. So in my view, the potential for German export financing is huge.
Thank you so much, Eva, for this overview on what you're doing and your pipeline. And I think we will come to that later on again when we speak about the opportunities in the market. So I think that's a very important point of our discussion today. But now, first of all, I would want to hand over to Chris and hear a little bit more about your daily business in Eastern Africa. And of course, what is here very interesting for us is also to learn how did you get in contact with Hermes cover and also with the Competence Center, which Eva is heading. Do you have any advice for the audience to share what to do? How do you have to act to get involved with Hermes covered? Maybe you have an example to share. So a lot of questions, but maybe you can give us an answer to that.
Right. Yes. I think that, as being in the space and being in development and architecture, you know, the biggest need, and I think Eva pointed out to this, is finance, good finance. And I think if you're familiar with some of the interest rates here locally in Kenya, you know, they're in the 14 to 18% rate, which really creates a challenge for any development project, because you can't really guarantee those kinds of returns. And so as we were exploring different opportunities, I was introduced to the Competence Center. On a small personal note, my partner is German, and she introduced me to Eva and her team as a very viable opportunity to look at ways in which we can bring creative financing structures to the market. Coming from the US, I was used to fairly sophisticated structures where you'd have 3 or 4, maybe even 5 tiers of finance, from local to municipal to at the federal level. But what you find in East Africa in general is you really just have the local banks lending. And they're not necessarily interested in longer term returns. They want to move their money fairly quickly. So working with you know, the Competence Center, looking at the different ECA type of opportunities, really presented itself as a much better option for finance that we could look at. And Eva obviously very quickly, when we presented the opportunity, introduced us to a number of agencies in Germany and in particular, that were able to look at the projects that we were working on, being able to structure, give us the rules. One, you know, you need to have so much German content, you need to have a good sponsor, who's backing the project, can the project pay itself off when it's done, who are the off-takers, you know, really in-depth conversation around structuring of the project. And the Competence Center was great at doing that, helping us think through those issues. And then obviously then, you know, looking forward to now the different manufacturers and different products that we could import into our market that were suit for purpose for what we were doing. So in particular, I think, and I mentioned this earlier, and maybe you did, Sophia, we're focused, and we founded this group that called Student Factory, that is keen on solving the huge need around purpose-built student accommodation. Right now, there's about a shortage of 60,000 beds in Kenya alone. If you look at the entire continent, it's a massive need. And we felt that being able to come in and work with institutions to provide suit for purpose accommodation would be something that not only has major impact on the ground, but has lasting impact long-term for students. And that's where we're really excited working on a deal with Eva to see how we can finance our first project and then roll that out across multiple countries in Africa.
Perfect. It's good to hear that, yeah, some real examples on how the interaction with the Competence Center is working. And thank you so much for sharing those insights. And yeah, I think you've already mentioned some of the hurdles that we face in the market, like finance, too high interest rates. That's something you came across, Chris. And I would also now like to dive a little deeper into the whole topic of risks and opportunities in the market. And maybe let's start from the positive note first, and let's start with the opportunities. And maybe with Eva first. I would like to know what do you see as the greatest opportunities in the region, countries as well as sector-wise? So where should we put our focus on in the next couple of years?
Thank you, Sophia. So it's actually a very, let's say, possibly I can answer like very wide on that. But before I do that, I wanted to say thank you to Chris. And I think he also pointed out a very important topic, the financing possibilities in Africa that might be different. And I think that local banks are very important partners, but obviously with German export financing, you have the possibility to get let's say a competitive alternative, but not only an alternative, it could be an additional financing structure. And I think this is also very important, that it's to open also the view to work together with local banks on German export financing. But going back to the potential, so I very often refer to the AFCFTA, the African Free Continental Trade Area Agreement, as an opportunity. There, the investment in infrastructure and also in digitalization is very important for all the countries to reach what is planned united market. On the other hand, I see also that renewable energy is a key sector, so to say, because I mean, the continent has a very good natural base for growing within that area. Obviously, health sector, logistics, agriculture, where the German equipment would be very interesting for the companies to invest in, and where I'm also happy to be of support for arranging German export financing structures. Lately, I had many discussions about logistics, and what I find very good, and I'm very happy about it, that some German suppliers are very willing to support, or even, I don't want to say push, but maybe push for German export financing for their local customers. And this is also very helpful for me, because within my role at the Competence Center, and Chris pointed out that I help also to structure, together with the exporters, we can really make the financing happen, and therefore also the German purchase happen. This is something, it's a teamwork. We try to do it as a team, and we all know that in a moment when we work together as a team, that can bring us a lot further. And it's also regarding ECA financing, and that's a very important point in my view. So I think that's more or less the potentials that I would see in the region. Yeah.
Thank you, Eva. Health sector, agriculture, logistics, and what is even more important is the teamwork. Yeah, very important point, I think, here, and also good that we have the different views on the market here. The Competence Center view as well as the importer view, and I think that's a good point now for Chris to take over. And also here, Chris, actually the same question. Do you share the view that Eva has just presented? Do you see the same opportunities or anything different to add from your side?
Yeah, I forgot absolutely. The construction. Sorry, Chris, I forgot to mention construction. I'm sorry.
Yes, I was going to say.
I'll leave it up to you to talk about construction then.
Yes. I think, yes. In construction, obviously housing, and a subset of that is, I'd say, affordable housing, and we slot into this student accommodation space. I will share this. Unlike in the West or maybe in Germany, African families have one way to build wealth or to provide a better future for their children, and that is through education. And they will sell whatever they have, their family belongings, to send their kids to school. Unfortunately, what happens is they come to school and there's no infrastructure because the government hasn't invested enough in it, or they've just invested in classrooms, but there's no money left for accommodation. And so we saw that as a huge niche for ourselves. Massive need. We have some major players already in the country doing some amazing things. So we see that as a major opportunity in terms of investment, and then that translates to obviously the ECA products and export import business.
Thank you, Chris. And I think that's a very, very important point here to mention education and the need for infrastructure in that regard to make it possible. And I think we have a lot of, also at our side, we see a lot of interesting projects in that area. And that now leads me, unfortunately, a little to the risk perspective or the challenges we see in the market. Because, of course, when we speak about opportunities in the Eastern African region, we cannot disregard the risks that we see. So we see challenges especially in the public sector from our side, and they're still pretty much existent and even rise, unfortunately, against the backdrop of COVID. On the other hand, we have a very promising private sector. And as you said, we have promising projects in the education sector, in the construction sector, in the agricultural sector or health sector. So there's a lot happening. And when we have a look at our cover volumes at Euler Hermes, those tendencies are partly confirmed. However, what we also see is that activity still is on a low level. It seems that the region somewhat is not taking advantage of its full potential. So my question now is, what do we have to do to release the full potential? What do we have to do? Where's the need? And maybe Chris, you can start with your view on that topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Pierre. There are no challenges in business, right? No.
That's good. Good to hear. Let's stop the discussion. That's a good.
I kid. You know, interesting enough, as a business, as when I came back, and we actually came back, started off working in the public sector, in education, doing large scale master plans for large institutions. And very quickly realized that we had to flip our business model. Currently, right now, from an architecture practice, I do 75% private, 25 public. Reduce that public exposure a little bit because it's fraught with its own bureaucracy, challenges, cultural differences in ways of doing business. Whereas in the private sector, you have a lot of multinationals, especially in Kenya, who understand modern ways of doing business, hold themselves up to high standards. So you're able to communicate across the table and hopefully get a deal done. But what you see is a unique public-private partnership model that is evolving on the continent, where it's what the public sector does is, which I really enjoy, is to give you the opportunity to have the private sector investment flourish. Some projects we're working on where the public sector will provide you the land. It might give you some tax breaks, and they say, okay, carry on private sector and do the infrastructure investment. So we're seeing a little bit of that. So I think maybe to put a pin on the question, manage your public sector exposure to where allows you to be in a little bit more control of the investment. And then obviously another challenge, obviously, and maybe in some cases an opportunity, choose your partners wisely, do a lot of research on them, understand what they have done in the past. Track record is everything. I tend to work with businesses or individuals who have had some exposure out of the continent, meaning that they know what best practice is. And so when you sit across the boardroom and you talk about best practice, they're like, yes, we get it. And then you can move towards closing the deal. So I think in a nutshell, manage your public sector exposure, choose your partners wisely, and then just to round off all of that, I will say as the biggest lesson I learned coming back to Africa was the incubation period of a project. By that I mean from the day you start talking to a potential importer or someone who wants to do a building of the sort, to the time you actually break ground and execute is way longer in Africa than it is in the West or in Germany. We do some metrics and tracking. We're looking at about 18 to 24 months from the day I start talking about a project to when I actually execute. And building in that resiliency and patience inside your organization is key to success in Africa. The deals are great. They just take a little bit of time if you're working with the right partners.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, a very important point you've just mentioned is that, and I found this very interesting and good to hear that you see room for the private sector to get involved, because I think that's one of the most important aspects, that we get the private sector involved in the business, and then that's key for economic development as well. So good to hear. And also a very interesting point you've mentioned was we need to be patient when we work in the region. So and with that, I would hand over to Eva as a German in Eastern Africa, being patient. And maybe you can also give your view on the opportunity, on the challenges we see in the market, the hurdles, and what do we have to do to get projects done.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, I think Chris made very important points. And for me, I totally agree to the incubation period that Chris mentioned. Of course, we have to be more patient here. I mean, we cannot come and think that it's like similar to our way of doing things. And that's one of the things that in your cultural lens, you have to take in consideration. Yeah, what I also find, and I'm now talking more about private sector, that is very important to see that here there are a lot of financing opportunities, export financing opportunities, a lot of interest in German equipment, German goods, products, but they might not be these big sizes that we are used to. So I have very often transactions lower than 5 million euro, but they are as important as the big sizes, so the bigger ticket sizes, let's say. And I think it's very crucial to also increase maybe the buyer credit or even the supplier credit opportunities for local customers who purchase for less than this 10 million ticket sizes. And what I also find what occurs sometimes is that the local purchaser might not have the right size balance sheet for ECA financing, where strong financials are really essential. So if a really good or strong balance sheet is lacking, then only a strong guarantor, a good guarantor, can make the financing happen. And in other examples, what I sometimes see, which is also maybe a challenge, is that companies might not have enough income in Forex. So there, the good thing is that there we can maybe try an on-lending structure that might be of help. That means that a German finance institution is on-lending to a local bank, and based on this on-lending, the local bank can then lend to the local importer based on German import. But all in all, I see an encouraging development towards export finance for German supplies. Local corporates get more familiar with the product, with ECA financing. And the advantages that before we already talked about local banks, but the advantages for German export financing would be definitely longer tenors, a competitive interest rate in euro and US dollar, and very often there's no need for further collateral, which is also making the product very interesting. So obviously challenges are here, but there's always something where you can try to reduce the challenges and increase the potential.
And that's what you are there for, right, Eva? To reduce the challenges and
exactly
finding the right solutions. Perfect.
Yeah, this is my focus, and this is where I want to help. Exactly.
Yes, very good. Thank you so much for your views on that. And I think now we have made a little turn or made a little trip throughout the whole range of different aspects we can discuss about the region. And with that, I would now like to go into the Q&A with the audience and see what questions we have here. I've already seen that there were some questions coming in, and I would now just take them from the top to the bottom and read it out for you. And I think the first question actually goes in, I would say, our direction, Eva, but I would hand over the question to you. How much German content must be present in a deal in order to qualify for Euler Hermes financing?
Okay, thank you. But I would also invite you to answer it. So it's actually 50%, minimum 50% German content. That means manufacturing in Germany. There is an exception when we talk about renewable energy. There we can reduce the German content to 30. But this has to be, let's say, presented and analyzed individually. Correct, Sophia?
That's right. Yes. Nothing to add.
Thank you.
Perfect. The second question, I think that goes a little bit more in your direction, Chris. When speaking about the challenges in the market, you've spoken about the incubation period of projects, and that projects sometimes take up to 24 months. So one question was, how is the payment moral in such situations? I'm not sure if you have any experience to share on that. I leave it with that. How is the payment moral? Do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, I'll try to maybe answer that. First off, it starts with picking the right opportunity that you are fairly confident you can see to the end. So you have to check all the metrics. First, I'm dealing with credible people. It's a viable project. I think Eva mentioned that we have a strong guarantor or sponsor, or ring fencing the deal. So if all the metrics make sense to you from a business standpoint, you look at it and say, okay, it looks like this deal can happen. Then you commit to that journey. And usually, and maybe I'll just be blunt, you're not spending a lot of money or paying out any money until the deal is ready, right? So it's more of your time investment and maybe bringing in maybe smaller partners to ring fence and solve smaller issues inside the deal to make it get through. Just for example, you might find it's a fantastic project, but gosh, you've tried everything and you're only getting 40% German content. Yeah, what can we do to get to that extra 10% so we can qualify? And bringing in the creativity, the right resources around that is what might take a little longer. So I think from that regard, that's how I would see that incubation period. And then post-financing, post-funding, post-import or export in that regard, we tend to see, and I'm new to the ECA type of products, but I think from what I hear from the Competence Center and others, is that if you've done your homework ahead of time, you then will find success in terms of payment and the tenure of those products and getting fully paid out. So it's maybe a long answer to that question, but I think it really boils down to making sure you've done your research, you're working with credible partners.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. No, I think that was a really comprehensive answer. And I mean, I have not raised the question, but to me, that was a very good answer. I'm just looking into Eva's direction. Do you have anything to add on that, or are you fine?
I was just wondering, because I was rereading the question. I mean, there's a different way of payment that you have to do. You have to pay the supplier, you have to pay the bank if you finance. So the question is not directed to supplier or to bank, or in general, if you can structure, let's say, a financing in a way that you know already that it takes up to 24 months, then you can structure it anyway. So I think that there should be some kind of deeper dive into the direction the question goes. So yeah, but yeah, I think that Chris, like, I would add, and I agree. Yeah, you have to, in the moment when you have your project pre-structured, and when you discuss You do not do it on your own. You have partners. So you have a bank that helps you. You might have bundlers that help you. You have your German supplier. So this is what I mentioned before. The teamwork is in that case very important. You all work together for make the structure good for all parties. And this is actually one of the, I would say, most important points in German export financing, and where I also, if needed, where I'm happy to help. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Eva. No, I think that's a very comprehensive answer. And yeah, if the person who raised the question would like to clarify anything additional, please feel free to raise another question. And with that, I would go to the next question then, which again goes into your direction, Chris, and I just read it out. Who are the buyers, borrowers in such student housing projects? Is it companies or is it the government?
Yes, that's a fantastic question. So especially in Kenya, the Kenya government had tried to execute a private-public partnership model with the public institutions, but they got the structure wrong. It was too bureaucratic, had too many layers. You had to go all the way up to top levels of government for approvals and such, almost to get sovereign guarantees. And so they haven't executed one bed in 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite a sad story. So for us, looking at the space, we very quickly opted to work with come at the sector from a private sector perspective. We will engage with both public and private institutions, but you come in as a private institution, and you partner with them to, if you will, provide them beds, and they give you students at an affordable rate. So we tend to see ourselves as the buyer, the importer, as a developer. There's other developers doing the same thing. You want to work with the developers that are focused on student accommodation, not go get a math teacher and have them deal with housing. So what we've done is we get operators who are very experienced in the space, who have done it for a number of years, so that also secures the business. So not only are you doing the development, you're bringing experienced operators, and if you have good financing, then that's a win-win model, because the students are there. The students will, if the pricing is right, the students will stay there. You need to manage them a little bit, but that tends to be the ecosystem. So it's more private developers buying product and building, and it's private operators, mostly international operators, running those facilities. That's what I've seen as I think a win-win model that works.
Yes, very interesting. Thank you so much, Chris, and also thank you for this very interesting question to the audience. I'm not sure. Let me check. I don't see any further questions from the audience. If not, I would go over to some further questions I have prepared, because that gives me more time to ask questions to you, which is a good thing. Maybe one additional question from my side, Eva and Chris. I mean, we have experienced now almost more than 1.5 years of pandemic and the Corona crisis. And my question would be, how did the pandemic actually affected your daily business? And additionally, how do you see, or do you see a recovery of the economy already in your day-to-day business? Do you experience a change? That would be very interesting to hear. And now I would start with Eva first.
Oh, okay. Good. So as we all know, our business life changed. So we could not travel, we could not meet people, we could not discuss or have conferences live in situ. So what we all had to do, we had to adapt to the virtual world. And I think it was very interesting to also experience that, because we realized that virtual meetings are possible, virtual conferences, webinars are possible, but it is also now that the COVID pandemic is kind of, I mean, not gone away, but reduced, and that many of us can get vaccinated, and that we can fly because like airports are open, we realized how important it is still to meet people, because it's actually the basis of business is meeting other people, talk to other people, understand other people, see the environment, the business environment of different countries, and that you cannot really do with virtual. But virtual was very helpful to go forward. So I think here in Kenya, and I traveled also to Tanzania in summer, and I traveled also to Botswana, Zambia, and South Africa. So there's always restrictions to travel, but it's possible to travel, and that's good. That's very good, so that we are really able to travel from one country to the other within not only the Eastern, but within the African continent, and we can also travel to Europe. So that is very good. So I think that it's encouraging to come and visit here in Kenya. All is quite, I would say, quite open. Of course, we have a curfew. Of course, we're all wearing masks. We are very, let's say, we take care. We are cautious. But of course, we can do business. We can meet. We have maybe restrictions in how many people we can meet, but we can do that. And it's very important. And in general, I would say that like I've seen today on a website, I've seen a very interesting slide. The biggest economies in Africa 2020 in the Eastern African region would be Ethiopia and Kenya. So of course, all the African countries, like all the others, we had a reduction in what business has been done and in the development. But now Kenya will have a growth of 4 or 5% also, which is like for 2021 magnificent. And yeah, I think it will go forward, and I see positive.
Thank you very much, Eva. Chris, how do you see it? How did the pandemic affect your daily business, and is there change happening already?
Yeah, that's obviously the proverbial question. I'd say in February of last year, in terms of our student factory, student accommodation business, the big elephant in the room was, are students going to come back to universities? Are we going to a full digital learning environment, and you don't need student accommodation? Well, we were bullish. We obviously thought that's not possible, but you couldn't prove it. Well, fast forward 18 months later, and we're seeing students are back in. We cannot do away with in-person learning. There's blended models, but actually what is interesting in the student housing side of things, students who are living in nicely built, nicely designed facilities opted to stay there as opposed to going home. Quite interesting. So because they had, cleaner environment, more social distancing, a little bit more services. They have a small clinic, they have a pharmacy next to where they're living. And so they were in a much better environment than going back home to maybe their villages or out of the city center and those types of things. So the reverse happened. We thought the industry could possibly die, but it actually showed more resiliency than most. So in our minds, we doubled down, said, okay, well, I think we need to invest more. And so we've seen our industry grow through the pandemic as opposed to shrink. And so that's one of, I think, this is the success stories on our side. Obviously, there are other markets, other sectors, other asset classes that have really struggled. Tourism has struggled, which it's coming back. Hospitality, which is related to that, obviously has struggled. So there's winners and losers. We've also, just to add a little plug here, our platform is very digitally savvy. We're at the forefront of digitization. And so we've seen a huge spike in that as well, going paperless, where we're structuring deals where students can go in and out of their rooms, deal with their meal plans on their cell phones, so on and so forth. So the digitization move has been a boost through the pandemic. From a student accommodation perspective, we've seen actually a growth in that sector, and we're very hopefully excited that that carries on, and we get to a post-pandemic business environment.
Yeah, I always like to hear the word post-pandemic. It's good to speak about post-pandemic. That always makes me happy. And it's a perfect bridge. Actually, you've just raised the keyword digitization that changed our lives. And it's a good bridge to one question that came from the audience. That is also for you, Chris. How do you think the impact of online studies will have on student accommodation in the future? So I think you've touched upon that already in your answer before, but maybe you can clarify.
Yeah, just to put a pin on it, I think there'll always be digitization that has taught us how to be a little bit more efficient in how we deliver education. I think it's also, Eva was pointing out in terms of traveling, that the big junkets and the big conferences are reduced. So we're spending our money wisely. So likewise, education has learned that a certain portion of education can be delivered through the digital realm. However, the need for in-person instruction, in-person learning, the need for students to cohabitate and live and work, not necessarily work, but be on a campus. And that social interaction is something you can't do digitally. And so that'll never go away. So, for us, we are seeing models where institutions are questioning how much infrastructure they've built. And when you're looking at a blended learning environment, do you have too much? Do you have too little? How do you balance that infrastructure with your enrollment? How are you now ramping up technology inside your classroom to allow for virtual learning? Some institutions weren't ready for virtual, or they weren't technology ready. So spending on that is something that is interesting as well from a export finance perspective. New tools, bring those to bear in institutions. We're seeing in our student accommodation projects where we're creating virtual studios as well inside the dormitories, so that in the event that students can't leave the dormitories or go to class, they can still have a digital learning experience as where they live. So there is definitely an impact, but I think an impact for the better. Institutions, businesses, developers will have to calibrate themselves to those new realities, but I think we're better for it in the long run. It's really forced us to think hard and critically about where we're spending our resources.
Perfect.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm actually wondering whether we have those developments in Germany already. I don't think so.
I didn't want to mention, yeah, we don't know.
There's a few. There's a few.
Thank you. No, that was really, really interesting. And now maybe one final question from the Q&A, and that again goes a little more into our direction, Eva. There's one question on the local content. So how about local content inclusion and considering new OECD guidelines? What could be the requirements for Hermes, and will it be required to be part of the supply contract? I would leave it again to you, Eva.
Sophia, I've seen that the question comes from a banker. So,
Seems
as
to
you're
be.
working in the banking department, I will hand it back to you. But in general, of course, there is a change. So it's 50% of export value, or 33.3, I think, of the total value that local content can be included. But please, Sophia, I leave it up to you to give an additional input on that.
No, I think that's actually everything we need to answer on that question. I mean, there had been a change in the OECD guidelines, as Eva just said. So we had a raise in the local content that is possible to be covered. It's, I think, 33.3% in the German scheme. It's 50% in the OECD scheme. But yeah, it's the same actually. And the second question, would it be required to be part of the supply contract? I mean, normally you would just, when you apply for cover, you would just tell us the portion of local content that is involved. We will not check the contracts, but maybe it would be good for you to have it in the contract, but we will not check on it. We just need the number, so what is involved, and that's it. Yeah, so I think that's the plain answer to that. Yes, and well, with that, we're somehow getting to the end of our session, but yeah, I have one, actually my favorite question on this panel, and I don't want to misphrasing it. It's a question on a more creative level and maybe a nice outro to our discussion, Eva and Chris. So my question is, if you could make one wish as regards the future developments of business in Eastern Africa, what would it be and why? And I would hand over to Chris first.
Well, I was going to say, you know, end to all pandemics, but anyway, but we know that actually, on a serious note, is something we have to build resiliency around. Is this COVID has taught us that this is going to happen again. So we need to future-proof as best as we can around those things and work smart. But from a continental or regional perspective, and I think, Eva, you touched on the Africa Free Trade Agreement. We know it's been ratified, we know it's been signed, the countries are saying, yeah, let's do it. I'd love to see that program really flourish and open up. And so if there's somebody in government on the call, please lobby for that, because that will unlock the potential of Africa, which is not in minerals and other things. The potential of Africa is in their human capital. And we need to unlock, if we are able to unlock that human capital, everything else will come into play. We will be building cities, we'll be building, you know, GDPs are going to go up, you name it. So I'm really, if I had one wish, if we can be able to unlock the human capital of the continent, I think we'll have done something for mankind.
Thank you, Chris. That's a great wish. Eva, how about you?
I also like, I love the wish that Chris mentioned. So mine would be actually also a bit in that direction. So I think that we talk and everybody discusses about the potential of the African continent. So my wish would be that this potential converts into business. That, you know, that there's approach, there's discussions, that there are B2B meetings, so that this potential can really convert into business opportunities. And yeah, that would be my wish.
Thank you so much, Eva. Perfect bridge for me to end the meeting now. Let's change opportunities into business. I think that's perfect words to end. And with that creative, but I think optimistic outlook, I can only say thank you to the two of you for your time and for your openness. I think it was a really interesting discussion on these important topics. Thank you to the audience for your interest and for tuning in and for participating so actively in the discussion. Thank you so much. And with that, now I wish us all a wonderful day. Take good care and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Goodbye.
Yep, have a good one. Yes, bye. Yeah.
Bye.